Welcome everybody again to another Sutta studies with Brother Benny. Today we will be studying the Dhammacariya Sutta. A brief introduction to our speaker. Brother Benny Liow is no stranger to the Buddhist community. Professionally, he is a senior VP of a multinational corporation and also a director of companies in Malaysia and the UK. His contribution to the Buddha Sasana is extensive to say the least, and he is a common sight in our circles for sharing the Dharma in various Buddhist centers. With his extensive knowledge of Buddhism, we are grateful that he will be sharing that knowledge with us today. So let us put our palms together and welcome Brother Benny. Welcome again, Brother Benny, and the mic is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share these slides. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So thank you again, and welcome to another session where we can discuss another of the Buddha's discourses from the Sutta Nipata. Right. So today we look at the sixth discourse in what is called the minor chapter of the Sutta Nipata, which is the Chulavagga. So this is, as you can see, Sutta Nipata 2.6. That means this is the second chapter, Sutta number 6. And in this second chapter, you also have the famous Mahamangala Sutta. Right? I'm sure many of you know about the discourse on blessings. So it's also found in this second chapter of the Sutta Nipata. So today we're going to look at the title is called Dhammacariya Sutta. I've used Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation as righteous conduct. But if you were to look at, I think, Ajahn Thanissaro's translation, I think he has used it as wrong conduct. Correct? And that's because I think if you look at this discourse, basically the Buddha is explaining about, particularly in this case, about a monastic who has got wrong conduct, yeah, and how should one actually have the right conduct. Okay, so so Bhikkhu Bodhi have translated as a righteous conduct. Now we're going to look at the sutta itself, which has got 10 verses, and then I'll try to explain each of the verses, all right, as it is explained in the commentaries to the Sutta Nipata, all right. And I think I mentioned in my very first discourse, our first discussion with you, that those of you who are interested in really reading more about the Sutta Nipata, there's this, of course, this wonderful translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi for the Sutta Nipata, right? An ancient collection of the Buddha's discourses. Some of you may be able to see this. Can you see the title of this book? Yeah. Okay. So if you are interested to read more, then please get hold of this copy. It's a fairly heavy book, very heavy. I think it has got, let's see how many pages. It's got 1,612 pages, right? It's hardcover. Okay, but of course, this is not for nighttime reading. So you don't try to read this when you're about to fall asleep. I think it's a wonderful compilation of all the discourses in the Sutta Nipata. Now you will notice that in the discourses that I share with you, I did not actually go into the background story, because each of these discourses, there's actually a background story, right? I think that will take too much time. We only have about 1 hour, 1.5. So I think more important, we zero in on the verses, because they are all mainly in verses, and then see their meaning and how we can actually apply in our lives as Dhamma practitioners, right? So I think that's more important. But if you are interested in the background story, like some are very amusing stories, like for example in the Dhammacariya, it is actually related to the story of a fish called Kapila. Right? So sometimes this sutta is also called Kapila Sutta. So if you Google Kapila Sutta, it's actually referring to the same Dhammacariya Sutta, because it was referring to a monk called Kapila who lived during the previous Buddha's time, not during Gautama Buddha's. And during the previous Buddha's time, he wasn't a very good monk, right? So in the end, but then he's a very learned. He knows a lot of Dhamma, but he doesn't practice it, right? So like in the Dhammapada, it is said that, if someone only knows a lot of the Dhamma but doesn't practice it, he's like someone every morning, he goes to the mountains and then he looks down and he sees, oh, my neighbor has got so many sheep, or this other neighbor has got so many cattle, or the other neighbor has so many sheep, the other neighbor has so many cattle, but he himself has none, right? So he's like someone who has a lot of knowledge but no practice. So that's not good. Yeah. So this is the background story is about this monk in the previous Buddha's time, where his name was Kapila, right? And then because of that, after he passed away, he was born in the woeful states, and then in the time of our Gautama Buddha, he was born as a fish, right? Okay, so fish, and that's how the story starts. So as I said, I'm not going to go through the background story, right? So I'm just going to go through the 10 verses, and then let's see its meaning, and then how we can actually apply some of them. Okay. Right. So that's the first one, just to remind us. All right. The second part. Okay, let's look at verse 1 and 2. You have a copy of the translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi, right? So I will just take you through the verses. So what is unique, if you would remember, you would recall by now, is that the Sutta Nipata, I have selected mainly those which are in verses rather than in prose. Okay, so today we're going to look at 10 of these verses. So the first slide here has got 2 verses. So righteous conduct. So the meaning of Dhammacariya, for example. So righteous conduct, the spiritual life. They call this the supreme treasure. So here you can say that the spiritual life means that one has got righteous conduct, right? So later I'll have some explanation on what is meant by righteous conduct and what the Buddha means when he talks about conduct. Now it says, but in one who has gone forth here means has become a monk, papaja, right? Going forth, papaja, right? From home into homelessness, so like the monastics, is of scurrilous character, right? This word scurrilous, not a very common word. We don't normally use this word, right? Initially, when I saw it, so I wasn't quite too sure what this means. So when I check it out, it actually means like when you try to accuse someone with the intention to damage his reputation. That's the scurrilous, or scurrilous. I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. Now he's also a brute, like an animal, who delights in harassing others. One's way of life is worse. One stirs up dust for oneself. So 2 verses, all right, but there are a lot of loaded words there. Okay, so let's see what does it mean here. So I've just given some explanations here from the first verse. Now, when the Buddha talks about righteous conduct, we primarily talks about righteous conduct through body, speech, and mind. Okay, again, we don't have time to go into each one of it, but just to remind you that this is explained, for example, in the 10 wholesome actions. 10 wholesome actions through body, through speech, and through the mind. So these 10 wholesome actions are actually an expansion of the 5 precepts. Right? So when we talk about through body, we're talking about like non-killing, non-stealing, no sexual misconduct, right? And the speech, of course, not just no lying, but you talk about harsh speech, you talk about slander, you talk about what do you call that? Frivolous talks and so on. So speech which is not righteous from the Buddhist perspective. Speech that is of no meaning, yeah. Speech that is of no meaning, that's meaningless. And then the mind, right? Mind that is free from hatred, greed, wrong views, and so on. So this is a righteous conduct. So by becoming a monastic, all right, so this scholar says that monastic has to have righteous conduct through his body, speech, and mind. Now, if we look at it in ourselves, we as lay people, lay disciples, we also need to have righteous conduct, don't it? Through our body, speech, and mind. Okay? So a very beautiful discourse which the Buddha gave, which I also had shared with some of you who attended the class maybe a couple of years back. It's called the Saleyaka Sutta, right? Saleyaka Sutta, where the Buddha talks about the 10 wholesome actions and the result of one practicing the 10 wholesome actions, as well as the result of one breaking the 10 unwholesome, the 10 actions through body, speech, and mind. Okay, so all that is covered in the Saleyaka Sutta. Right? So I just mentioned that so that you can do that as a homework to find out more about that. All right. Then the other line, if you remember, the Buddha also talks about the righteous conduct and then the spiritual life. Now here, of course, the Buddha was addressing the monks. If you read the Sutta Nipata, this is considered one of the oldest part of the Pali Canon. And here, the Buddha's teaching was primarily addressed to the monastics. Yeah, not so much to the lay people. This particular discourse was meant for a monastic. But of course, as lay people, we can see what is it that we can practice, right? Now, for the spiritual life, is explained, for example, in the commentaries. For the monastic, spiritual life means specifically abstinence from sexual activity. Yeah, that is why, for example, as lay people, we don't have that particular precept. So our precept is, when it comes to sexual activity, is kamesu michachara, right? Vera matni sikhapanam samadhiyami. Whereas for the monk, for the monastics, their particular precept on sexuality is not kamesu michachara, but abramacharya, right? That means abstinence from sexual activity for monastics. So that's for monastics. But as I said, we are lay people, so we follow the 5 precepts. So the explanation on the spiritual life, there's a slight variation here, right? So from abstinence from sexual activity, the 5 precepts would be abstain from sexual misconduct, right? So that's how it's explained, for example, in the commentaries from the Sutta Nipata here. Now, then it says righteous conduct, the spiritual life, they call this a supreme treasure. Who is they? They call this, they will be the holy ones, the arahants, the enlightened ones. So they call this the supreme treasure. So in other words, if you have righteous conduct, and if you are a monastic, you follow the what do you call it? The Abramacharya precept, and as a lay person, you practice the 5 precepts strongly. So this is considered a treasure, a supreme treasure, right? A wonderful treasure. Okay. So that's basically explanation 1. But if one who has gone forth from home into homelessness, right? Let's see, let me push the next slide. He is of a scurrilous character. I think just now I mentioned to you this word scurrilous character means someone who, likes to accuse someone, to accuse another person with the intention of damaging his reputation, right? So that means that scurrilous. He's a scurrilous character, right? Sometimes we meet people like that, right? Especially when, sometimes in politics, we hear about sort of these things, right? Want to tarnish your reputation, scurrilous character. Now, that is only possible if you use harsh speech, isn't it? So you remember the Buddha talks about the conduct through speech. So one is harsh speech, all right? So harsh speech is when you try to run down a person's character. Okay? So here the Buddha says that if one is a monastic, but one uses harsh speech, one is of scurrilous character, it becomes quite useless if you're just wearing the robes and you shave the head, right? So someone with a shaved head but wear robes, but don't practice righteous conduct, don't use kind speech. So he is not a monastic. He's not a true samana, as the Buddha would use the word. Okay, so sometimes you hear the word that, sometimes even lay people, you need not have to be a monastic, but you can wear the inner robe. Where the inner robe means, that's not necessarily means that you live like a monk, but you follow what is required as a lay person. If you follow the 5 precepts and you seriously observe the 5 precepts, then you're what is called in Buddhism, a sappurisa, a good person. You heard of this word, sappurisa? right? So there's also, I think, 1 or 2 suttas which are named of Sapurisa. That means Sapurisa, when you translate, it means the true man, you know, or the perfect person, or the good person, Sapurisa, right? It's from the word Satcha, Purisa, like it's a person, so true, a true person. So it literally translates as a true person, right? So if you are interested to find out more what the Buddha has got to say about who is a Sapurisa, then you can Google this Sapurisa Sutta, right? So it explains all the details about that. Okay, so one should not be of scurrilous, right? And then he also say a brute who delights in harassing others. All right. So a brute is like an animal. In other words, he likes to disturb people. And here, there are 2 very important words which is very commonly used in Buddhist teachings. It's called hiri and otapa. Again, some of you may be familiar, especially those of you who have done meditation. And I think probably a meditation teacher would have used these 2 words. In other words, he always have this feeling of being ashamed to do evil. You know, it's a kind of a conscience, you know, that say, oh, I would not do evil. So it's a fear. This is not the fear of doing good. It's a fear of doing evil. So in the Pali term, it's called hiri. So this is a character of a Sapurisa, a good person. He's always afraid to do something that will harm other people, that would harm himself, right? Because he understands the law of karma. Okay, so one is he feels ashamed. The other one is he dread to do evil. So you see, there's a slight difference. That's why these 2 words always come together. Hiri otapa. Hiri otapa, right? So it's called, one is you feel ashamed to do evil. And then the other is fear to doing evil. So these are 2 very closely related words. Now, this is actually found in the Abhidhamma. A lot has been explained. So if you are interested, I mentioned that it's called the Pugala Panyati, right? The Pugala Panyati. So you can read that. There's more details on what the Buddha meant by having this feeling ashamed to do evil and the fear to do evil. So that's a slight difference, right? Hiri. Now, then the other one, Buddha says, one's way of life is worse. One stirs up dust for oneself. Now, what is this dust? Right? You remember this word dust was used when after Prince Siddhartha became enlightened, and for a while he was reflecting whether he should teach the Dhamma, because he realized that the Dhamma that he discovered was profound, difficult to understand, you know, but yet he realized that this Dhamma, you know, is of benefit to people if they understand it, if they practice it. And then when he thought further, he said, or he found that there are beings with little dust in their eyes who can see the Dhamma. Remember that expression? There are beings with little dust in their eyes. So because of that little dust, so when they listen to the Dhamma, they can comprehend it, they can put it into practice, and then they can realize the fruits of the practice. So that's the dust, okay? But if you have wrong practice, then you stir up more dirt, right? Then your dust becomes more, all right? And all this dirt or dust, for example, the Buddha says, they use the word called kilesas, or defilements, or cankers, right? Greed, or lust, or hate, or delusion, and so on. So that's the dust, okay? So that's the explanation on the first 2 verses, right? So I'll go on to the verse 3 and 4. Now, verse 3 and 4, it says, a bhikkhu who delights in quarrels. So a bhikkhu here is specifically a monk, right? Isn't it? The word bhikkhu is monk in Pali, right? And then nun will be bhikkhuni, isn't it? So for those of you who study maybe Mahayana Buddhism, where the texts are in Sanskrit, so you will not see the word bhikkhu, it becomes bhikshu, right? So bhikshu and bhikshuni. Right. So in this particular text, because if we look at the context of it, I think the Buddha was specifically referring to a monk. But again, you know, it doesn't only apply to a monk. Even a lay people lay people like you and me, for example. So let's see how applicable this is. All right. So it says a bhikkhu who delights in quarrels. Bhikkhu. Or it can be any person who enjoys quarreling, arguing, right? Cloaked by the state of delusion. I mean, covered up by the state of delusion. He does not know what has been declared. What is it that's been declared? So he doesn't understand what has been declared. In other words, what actually was taught by the Buddha. All right. So because he always liked to quarrel, he always liked to put forward his views about things. He's very stuck in views. All right. So in Buddhism, there's a word that they use, ditti, views. All right, like a panyati, always a lot of quarrels, because of their views. Right? They're wrong, they are stuck in views. And because of that, they are in a state of delusion. When that happens, they will not understand what actually was the Dhamma by the Buddha. Right? Then verse 4, the Buddha continues, harassing one who is self-developed, led on by ignorance. One does not know defilement as the path leading to God. So again, let's take each of the sentence here and see what it means, right? So the first one is about quarrels, right? Someone who delights in quarrels. Now quarrels, okay. In a short while, I will share with you one particular sutta where the Buddha explains about how to overcome quarrels, right? So here the quarrels means in the commentaries, it explained, don't listen. In other words, they don't listen to the Buddha. The Buddha told them not to quarrel, but they continue to quarrel. Right? So instead, they should practice the 6 qualities grounded in love. In a short while, I'll share with you what that means. Right? And then when it talks about delusion is basically lack of self-control. That will lead to quarrel. Right? And harassing one who is self-developed. So the one who is self-developed here refers to an arahant. Okay, so in other words, you quarrel or you harass an arahant, the result is rebirth in hell realms, right? Hell realms or in a woeful state. Okay, let's go back to the Buddha talks a little bit about quarrels, right? So this is from the Dhammacariya Sutta, right? So again, we don't have time to run through this discourse, but if you're interested, you can Google this particular discourse called the Dhammacariya Sutta. It's a very interesting discourse because it's actually a story about 2 monks who end up quarreling just over a small matter, just about a very, very small matter. Okay, and then the Buddha tried to kind of mediate, but the monks wouldn't listen. The monks were stuck in their views. They said, no, what we said is correct. What the other monks said was not correct. So in the end, the Buddha decided to avoid these 2 monks. In fact, or maybe not avoid is not the right word. He boycotted the 2 monks. Then he went to live in the jungle. And they say that when he was staying in the jungle, the elephant came to actually support him, give him food, and so on. So that's the story. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the story. Now, in the Dhammacariya Sutta, the gist of it is that how do you avoid quarreling with people? If you develop these 6 qualities, right? In other words, actually these 6 qualities, you actually divide it into, you can actually compress it, right? Basically, you practice the first 3, you practice loving kindness. You have loving kindness through body, speech, and mind. Not only privately, but also publicly. Right? So this is an interesting point. So in other words, you not only practice loving kindness, in other words, you not only do metta when you're sitting on your cushion at home or in a retreat, and then you radiate metta. All right, but publicly, that means when you deal with people in real life. So that is when metta should also be expressed. So loving kindness is not something that you only do privately in your meditation, but you manifest it in your interaction, in your dealing with other people. So that is what is meant by publicly. So you do it from bodily actions, from the things you say, and from your thoughts. Right? So the Buddha was very precise. body, speech, and mind, and not only privately. So please remember this, especially those of us who do metta. Always remember that metta is not enough if we only have metta when we are in meditation. When we are sitting in meditation, we do metta. Metta must be expressed in real life when we deal with other people. Okay, so that's the first tree. And then the other tree, in the Kosambiya Sutta, the Buddha says one should share things. Of course, here the Buddha is referring to the monks in the Kosambiya. So he said one should share things with other monks, right? So sharing. So sharing is also very important. In fact, from this sharing, that is why the first preliminary practice is dana, isn't it? We talk about dana, sila, bhavana, right? We talk about giving. So that's sharing, right? So we not only keep things to ourselves, we share with other people, right? So that is share things with other monks. Here, of course, we talk about monks, but again, for lay people, I think it applies. Now, you can interpret it like publicly and privately. Privately, it could mean you not only share things among people close to you, but you also share publicly with those people that you may not even know, but who are in need of help, for example. Okay? Like during the recent flood, right? Flooding, right? So I'm sure you don't really know all the people who are affected by the flood, but you share whatever you have, be it clothes, with it money, with it food, you know, with all those people who are in need of such. That is publicly, right? Not just privately. Okay. Then the last two is possess virtues publicly and privately. So again, you see, the Buddha is very precise here. So it's not only that you are virtuous when you are in retreats, when you are in meditation, or when you're at a Buddhist society, then you behave very well. Like privately, you know, you're very well. But when you're publicly, when you're in with people, right? That is why I always believe that whatever mind training or meditation or mental cultivation that we do, we must be able to manifest that in our relationship with other people. Then we can say the Dhamma is meaningful, right? The Dhamma is alive, right? We can deal with others. So you practice virtues, not just privately, but with other people. Likewise, right views, right? So we must have right views, because the problem is if we don't have right views, we become very dogmatic. We get attached to the views, right? We get attached. The moment we get attached, then we will always have this concept of I am right, you are wrong. So that's where the ego comes in, right? So as you can see, one leads after another. So that's why the Buddha explained so important. This is a clear example. If you read the Kosambiya Sutta, you find that because the two monks, they are so stuck in their own views that they are right, that they will not, they're prepared to see the other perspective of things, right? Okay, so this is just a summary. The Kosambiya Sutta is much longer than just these six lines, but I've extracted this because I thought it has got some relevance to this topic about quarrels, right? Because here in the third verse, the Buddha says, a bhikkhu who delights in quarrels. So immediately when you hear about that, it reminds me of the Kosambiya Sutta. So I strongly recommend you to assess this sutta. You can find it easily on the internet, right? You can go to Assess to Insight, right? But I think that will be Achantani Saro's translation, right? So please go through this. Okay, now verse 5 and 6. Verse 5 and 6. Now then the Buddha says, having entered the lower world, going from womb to womb, from darkness to darkness, such a bhikkhu meets suffering after death. Right? So having entered the lower world, what is the lower world? Right? It is not like you're staying in a two-story house, but the lower and upper. So lower world here would refer obviously to the woeful states. Okay, going from womb to womb, that means life after life, right? Because the Buddha talks about rebirth, isn't it? About rebirth, life after life. And from darkness to darkness. I will share with you a sutta about the 4 types of people. Yeah, such a bhikkhu meets suffering after death. Right? So in other words, because of his wrong conduct, right, then at the dissolution of the body, he is reborn in woeful states in the lower world. Okay, then the para 6, he said, as there might be a cesspit. You know what's a cesspit? Cesspit is like, you know, in the old days, you know, like, I don't know, maybe even in India today, you know, when you need to go to the toilet, you know, to pass motion, you know, they don't have modern toilet facilities. You dig a hole in the ground, and then you dispose all your waste, right? So after a while, you find that as there might be a cesspit full to the brim. After a while, the cesspit becomes full, isn't it? Full to the brim, right? So many years old, right? Such a one would be similar. For one who is blemished, it's hard to purify. So here, basically what it means is that if you continue to be unrighteous, you continue to do things which is against what the Buddha mentioned as the 10 wholesome actions through body, speech, and mind. It is like you know, you have the cesspit, you know, every day in the morning and evening, you know, you dispose your waste, you discharge your waste material. What's going to happen after a couple of months, maybe a year, you find the cesspit is going to be full to the brim. All right, when that happens, it's very difficult to clean the cesspit. Very, very difficult to clean the cesspit. Of course, the Buddha was using a rather crude example, right? Because I know, maybe I'm sure nowadays we don't have cesspits in definitely not in Setia Alam or right, or in Kota Kemuning. Okay, let's see what is the explanation. So the lower worlds. So lower worlds, of course, refers to the animals, the hells, the ghosts, and asuras. So altogether, how many worlds do we have? There's 6, isn't it? Right, six worlds, isn't it? Animals, hells, ghosts, asuras, and what 2 are missing? Which is the human world and the Deva world. Right? Now I said 6. Of course, in the Orthodox Theravada tradition, we talk about 31 planes of existence, right? 31 planes. 6 is really more of a later tradition. In the Mahayana, in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about 6 worlds. But even in the early texts, like for example, in one of it, the sutta called the Janusonin Sutta, you find that the Buddha then mentions about five realms of existence, and the Asura realm was not mentioned. Right? So the Asura realm probably got added in much later. So anyway, out of the 6 animal realms, hell realms, ghost realms, Asuras, human realm, and the Deva realm. In the 31 planes of existence, the Deva realm is expanded, like 6 Deva realms, and then you've got, you know, many Brahma realms. Right? So you find that out of 6 realms, 4 are actually woeful. 4 are not realms that you want to be reborn in. Okay, these are called the lower world. Animal realms, hells. Hells, you see, I spell it as plural because in Buddhism, unlike in other religions, you talk about one hell. In Buddhism, there are so many hells. I can't remember how many. You got hot hells, you got cold hells, right? So you got different types. You got the big ones, you got the small ones, right? And then the Pali word for hell is niraya. So it's very similar to the Malay word niraka. Is it very similar? Huh? Ghost realms. The ghost realm will be your asuras. Your peta realm, right? And then the asuras. Okay, the asuras, right? They are supposed to be devas, but they are the fallen angels, right? They fought with the devas, and then as a result they were pushed down to another realm. So it's known as the asura. If you look at the word itself, asuras, you see it's A-S-U-R-A, right? Asura. The A is the prefix for surah. Surah is, what is surah? You know the Malay word sang surya? Surya KLCC? Surya means the sun. That means brightness, light. So asura means darkness, right? Because these beings, they fall down into darkness. So they are called asuras. All right. Okay, just a little digression there. Okay. Now, darkness to darkness. Okay. I'll introduce to you one discourse where the Buddha talks about this realms of misery. When one of the first teachings that I learned when I first encountered the Dhamma from the late Chief Sri Dhammananda, I always remember he talks about 4 types of people. One who goes from light to darkness, from darkness to light, from darkness to darkness, from light to light. He always likes to give these teachings. Those of you who are around my age, right, who have the benefit of listening to the late chief, you may have heard of this before. But I never actually knew where it came from. I never actually knew which part of the sutta. I thought it was something the late chief just, through his genius, he just started it out. Then a couple of years back, I found that actually it was found it was also a quote from a letter to a friend, which is a Mahayana text, where Nagarjuna was actually advising a king. It's called a letter to a friend. And I didn't even know that there is a Pali equivalent until very recently that I thought, there's even a Pali equivalent to that. So which actually convinced me that actually the more you study the teachings, whether it's in Theravada or it's Mahayana or in Vajrayana, if you go back to the core text, you find that actually it's very, very similar. It's all there. All right? So we'll come to that, inshallah. So cesspit. So after countless rebirths in misery, difficult to purify the smell and filth. So this is how the what they call the commentary explain it. But we can look at it in another way, right? So if you're born in the woeful state, you're born in the animal realm, hell realm, ghost realms, asura realms, it makes it very difficult for the conditions for you to move up, to the upper realm. Okay, that is why, for example, all of us are born as human beings. All right, we're born as human beings. So in the Chigala Sutta, the Buddha says to be born as a human being is so rare. It's like, the story of the one-eyed turtle who lives at the bottom of the great ocean, and once maybe in 1,000 years, the one-eyed turtle comes up to the surface of the ocean, and then there's a yolk that floats around, and then the half-blind turtle try to put his neck into the hole of that yolk. What is the probability of that one-eyed turtle putting its neck into that yolk? Once in 100 years, it floats up. Very, very rare, right? Very, very rare. So likewise, to be born as a human is even more rare, even more rare. So the Buddha says we are born as a human. So this is found not only in the Chigala Sutta, I think even in the Devadaha Sutta. So many suttas Buddha talks about it, right? And those of you who are familiar with Tibetan teachings, like in the Lumbrim, the first thing that we study is that there are 4 things that turns our mind towards the Dharma. And the first thing that we should remember is we have this precious human life. This precious human life. There are 4 things. They call 4 things that turns the mind towards Dharma. Right? So it's the very first teaching in Lumbrim. Right? So you can see how important it is and how precious, how wonderful all of us are to have been born as a human and to be able to come in contact with the Dhamma. Right? So let's make sure that even if this life we are not enlightened, it doesn't matter, but at least we have strong enough seeds of the Dhamma that our next life we will still be able to come in contact with the Dhamma. So that's very important. So don't end up like the Buddha mentioned in the Sutta Nipata, don't end up in the cesspit. Then you find it very, very difficult to climb up. And then the 4th one, who is blemish, of course, whose actions have been defiled for a long time. If that happens, then lots of suffering. Okay? So I'm just going to show you this sutta. So it's called the Dhammacariya Sutta. This is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 4, Sutta 85. So now I can tell the late Chief Reverend late chief, I found the sutta where you have always been teaching us about the 4 types of persons. Right? One who is in darkness because of misconduct is hated for greater darkness. One who is in darkness but because of virtuous conduct is hated for light. And one who is in light but due to negative actions and conduct is hated for darkness. And then one who's in light and conducts himself with virtue is hated to light. Okay, I don't have time to go through each one of it. Each one of it is so beautiful, and each one of it we can take 20, 30 minutes just to go through of it, what is meant by darkness, what is meant by misconduct, greater darkness. But what is key here is that we can change our conduct. And that's where karma is not fate. Karma is not predestination. Karma is something we can change. Okay? One who's in darkness, but because of virtuous conduct, is hated for light. So in other words, even if now we are in darkness, but if we change our conduct through understanding the Dharma, we practice righteous conduct, Dhammacariya, then we can head towards light. This is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama refers to as we are able to transform our mind. Transform our mind, right? Okay, so I just leave you with this, Dhammacariya Sutta. Remember this sutta? When you hear this called 4 types of person, then you remember where it is from. So please read this, and especially I think the commentaries also have a very good explanation. All right, so let me go on. Verse 7 and 8. Okay, when you know one like this, bhikkhus, one attached to the home life, of evil desires, evil intentions, evil conduct, and resort. So, in other words, here he's saying that this person is a bhikkhu, but he's still attached to the home life. So, as if he has not left home. All right. So like the earlier phrase, it's just that his head is shaven, he's wearing robes, but he's behaving like he's a lay person. So that's not good. All right. Especially if you continue to have evil desires, he got evil intentions, evil conduct, and he resorts to doing all those things. So the Buddha here was very clear, very precise that, here he was addressing the bhikkhus. You are bhikkhu, please live like a bhikkhu, right? So I always believe that it's wonderful if a person decides to be a monk or a nun, okay? But sometimes maybe due to insufficient merits or because of different reasons, if the person is not able to remain as a monk, I think it is better that he renounce and continue as a layman, but practice his precepts well as a layperson, rather than continue to be in the robes and then break the precepts and then bring disrepute to the Sangha. All right. So I think that's a very important point. All right. So if we are a layperson, of course, we follow strictly to our lay precept. If one is a monk or monastic, then one should stick strongly to one's precepts as a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. I think that's what is mentioned here. When you know one like this, bhikkhus, one attached to the home life, if you continue to have evil desires, evil intentions, evil conduct, and then that's not good. Okay. Now, having come together in harmony, all of you should shun him. Cast out the trash, expel the depraved fellow. So here the Buddha was very firm, all right? Very firm, If you meet this type of characters, all right, you should not give him support. Now here the Buddha is not saying that you should take a stick and beat him up or you should chase him away. Just do not support him. And I think I can't remember which particular sutta, but in the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the suttas, the Buddha actually gave some advice on how you should deal with people who wear the robes but don't practice, or who breaks the Vinaya, and they break the Vinaya. So how should you react to such? You should not. Then Buddha says, do not support such type of person. One shows to such people, such so-called monks that you are actually bringing disrepute to the sasana, to the Sangha. So we will not support you, but we bear you no anger, we bear you no hatred, no ill will. It's just that we will not support you. because as a monk, you are dependent on the support of the lay people, but you have to change, you have to improve yourself. So there's some, those of you who remember which particular sutta, you can share with me after the talk. Yeah. So I think the Buddha was very precise here. But here you find that the Buddha was very firm. All of you should shun him, right? Cast out the trash. He's like a trash, right? Expel the depraved fellow. Now, it may sound very strong words, but all this is done for the well-being and for the welfare of that person, rather than out of anger or of hatred. Okay. Now, the explanations, right? So, attached to home life. Now, what is this attachment to home life? Now, I will share with you a particular sutta which explains this in greater details, and then talks about evil desires. Evil desires, of course, in the commentaries, it refers to cravings and attachments. Evil intentions would be unwholesome thoughts of greed, hate, and delusion. Your lobha, dosa, moha, right? The unwholesome thoughts. And then evil conduct, again, through body, speech, and mind. Remember the 10 unwholesome actions through body, speech, and mind, which the Liow Sutta expounds in great detail. Yeah? And then evil resort, right? Evil resort, that means you resort with prostitutes and so forth. This is what the commentaries say, so I just put it in. Right? So even during, so that's why they say prostitution is the oldest profession, right? Even during the Buddha's time, you have got this so-called profession, quote unquote. Okay, let's look at what is meant by attached to home life. Home life, the commentary talks about the 5 chords of sense pleasures. I think I missed it out. It's okay. Let me get to this. So the strengths of sense pleasures. This is actually from the Dhammacariya Sutta. This is Sutta 26 in the Majjhima Nikaya. So here the 5 chords of strengths will be forms cognizable by the eye, sounds cognizable by the ear, smells cognizable by the nose, taste cognizable by the tongue, and touch cognizable by the body, which are wanted, lovely, pleasant, likable, sensual, and teasing. Something that you want. All right. So this is a 6th sense, the five senses, right? Through body, through ear, through your nose, through your tongue, your taste, and through your touch. Okay. So this is something that we want. And you remember in the first discourse that the Buddha gave, remember in the first discourse, the Dhammacariya Sutta, the Buddha says to be separated from things that you like, to be cut off, or to be separated from things that you love. That is a form of suffering. Not to be associated with things, or to be associated with things that you do not like, is also a form of dukkha. Right? So this is an example. So here in another discourse, Dhammacariya Sutta is the noble quest. So in the Sutta on the noble quest, Buddha talks about this. Right? In fact, in this discourse, you can also read a little bit about the life story of the Buddha. Right? So it's a very interesting discourse, right? Sutta 26. Okay. So again, because of time factor, I just throw you the title of that discourse. So I hope after today's class, you can Google this particular discourse, and then you can read more about this. Now, the other one is talking about harmony, right? Actually, this is also taken from very similar to the Kusambhiya Sutta, but Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, who just passed away recently, right? So he has put it in his own words, right, about what it means by living in harmony, which I thought is really beautiful, right? Again, I think it need not necessarily applies to only to monks or nuns, but lay people like you and me, we can also benefit from understanding these 6 things of living in harmony. If you want to find out more, you can read the source. I also give you the source. It's called Harmony in the Sangha. Please remember, in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, or even in many Mahayana traditions, when they talk about Sangha, they need not necessarily means the monks and the nuns. Lay people, they also include the Sangha. So it's called the general Sangha. Of course, in the Theravada tradition, when we talk about Sangha, it generally means the monastic Sangha. Okay, you are clear about that. So that you don't get confused, right? because when you read the Mahayana text, when they say Sangha, they also include lay people as members of the Sangha. Okay? Share a common space, example, home, forest, right? Share the essentials of daily life together. Observe the precepts together. Use only words that lead to harmony, right speech, right? Share insights and understanding together. Respect others' viewpoints and not forcing another to follow your own view. Right? You find it very similar to the Dhammacariya Sutta, right? Isn't it? So when I read the Dhammacariya Sutta and I look at this, it's very similar. He just said, Ting Yat Han in his great way, he just knows how to explain it in a way that, that ordinary people can understand much easier. Okay, living in harmony. So I'll leave that slide with you. Okay, so I'm going to end with verse 9 and 10. This is already coming to 3:30. Then sweep the chaff away, non-ascetics, who imagine themselves ascetic. All right. Having blown away those of evil desires, of evil conduct and resolve. So let the pure, ever mindful, make the dwelling with the pure. Then harmonious and judicious, you will make an end of suffering. Okay. So the end. So here, it's like a further explanation. It says, sweep the chaff away, the unwanted part, the non-ascetics, who imagine themselves ascetic. The Pali word used here is samana. Samana. Right? So the Buddha, sometimes he refers himself as a samana, right? As an ascetic. Right? In Sanskrit, it's sramana. Right? In the Mahayana tradition, it's called sramana. So in Sanskrit. So in Pali, it's samana. So sweep away all those non-ascetics who imagine themselves as ascetic. It's not a real ascetic. Sometimes you find in the suttas, the Buddha says, he who calls himself a Brahmana is not a real Brahmana if he doesn't practice, for example, righteous conduct in body, speech, and mind. He's only a Brahmana in name. Okay? Or you can use the word, he's only an ascetic in name, not a real ascetic. Right? But a true ascetic, right, is someone who is righteous. That's why the name of this discourse is righteous. Okay? So let the pure, ever mindful. So again, mindfulness, right? So mindfulness, even in the old part of the Pali Canon, in the Sutta Nipata, which is considered one of the oldest portions of the Pali Canon, you find that mindfulness is also mentioned. So let the pure, ever mindful, make their dwelling with the pure, right? So in other words, let the wholesome thoughts always be sustained with wholesome thoughts. Yeah. When you do that, what will happen? There will be harmony, harmonious, and judicious. And you do that, there will be an end of suffering and an end of dukkha. Right? So just as, for example, we find in the first discourse that the Buddha taught, even in practically all that the Buddha's taught, he always talks about. It is said, if you were to summarize the entire Buddha's teachings of 45 years into 2 lines, what would be that? What would that be? It would be the Buddha only taught about suffering and, more important, how to overcome suffering. Right? So the Buddha taught 2 things. What is suffering, understand suffering, and how we can overcome suffering. Of course, today, modern context, we like to make it more sexy. People don't like to hear the word suffering. So we say the Buddha talks about happiness, isn't it? Right? Well, it's basically that. If you end suffering, you experience happiness. Right? I remember a couple of years back, Ajahn Brahm, I think he was saying that what is the 3rd noble truth? Traditionally in Orthodox Theravada circles, 3rd noble truth is what? What is the 3rd noble truth? The end of suffering, isn't it? And end of suffering is Nibbana, right? But I think very cleverly he said the 3rd noble truth is happiness. So people, Orthodox Theravada say, oh, how can you say that? No. 3rd noble truth is Nibbana, not happiness. But then, what is Nibbana? There's a Pali phrase, he says, Nibbanang paramang sukhang. So Nibbana is the highest happiness. So in that sense, Ajahn Brahm is not wrong. But he's been very skillful. So this is where I think for the Dhamma to be able to penetrate the modern minds, we have no choice but to interpret it in a language which the modern people understand. Like mindfulness, right? today mindfulness is sweeping the world, right? But then it comes in so many different forms, from secular mindfulness and to non-religious type of mindfulness. But at the end of the day, you go back to the roots, you find it's actually from the Satipatthana Sutta, right? If you speak to someone like John Kabat-Zinn, have you heard of John Kabat-Zinn? John Kabat-Zinn is the guy who started the mindfulness craze in the West. John Kabat-Zinn, who started what is called MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. When he first started it, he wanted to take away all the religious aspects from mindfulness, because he knew it will never sell if he introduced mindfulness as a Buddhist practice. But today, when he talks, when you listen to him talk with the likes of people like Daniel Goleman, you find that he's actually bringing in the Satipatthana Sutta. He's talking about the Dharma, talking about Buddhism, because people already today have accepted mindfulness. So you can bring back the real Dharma. So sometimes it's a very skillful way of doing things. Okay, so I will end that. Okay, maybe with just one last sutta, because here you remember here it talks about when the mind is not pure. It is said that the greed, hatred, and delusion, anger is the one that is most difficult. It's the sharpest. It's like a volcanic eruption, right? So that reminds me of the Leka Sutta in the Dhammacariya 3.133. So how should we treat our anger? We give the simile of writings on the rock, writings on sand, and writings on water. When one is angered, anger stays with him for a long, long time. That is like you have a writing on the rocks. You write something on the rocks. The writings will not be easily erased, it will remain there. And then writings on the sand. When one is angry, anger doesn't stay with him long. It's like you write on the sand. After a while, when the water comes in, it just blows it away. So your anger is gone. So anger doesn't stay with him long. Writings on water. When one is angered, one is always congenial in purpose. So one doesn't get angry when one is angered. Right? So I thought I just want to end this afternoon's discourse with this to introduce to you, share with you this very beautiful and very short, inspirational saying from the Leka Sutta. So we ask ourselves, do we want to be like the writings on the rocks, writings on the sand, or writings on the water? Okay? So thank you very much. So may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness and always be without suffering. And may all sentient beings be in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Okay? So if this session has been useful, please take it along with you and put it into practice. If it is not, please leave it behind. Thank you. I think we have about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes?
Yes.
Q&A, okay?
Yeah, we can open to the floor.
Please.
Any question? Any thoughts? Anyone?
Any comments? Any comments? Anybody would like to make some comments?
Brother Manny, Penny here.
Yes.
I cannot imagine how to anger on the water. When you are angry, I just cannot imagine how to write things on water. I cannot imagine.
It all starts with, first of all, step one is we have to tell ourselves that anger is one of those defilements that we want to manage, we want to overcome. That is the first step. All right. That will be the first step before we can even talk about writings on water. That's the first step. We must tell ourselves mentally that there's something we want to do. Then second step is we make efforts how to overcome our anger. So that's where mind training comes in. Depending whatever type of meditation that you may follow, meditation practice will help you to recognize thoughts that arise. If it is a wholesome thoughts, unwholesome thoughts, all right, you proper meditation, you will be able to recognize anger have already arisen. You can recognize that, then you'll find that it may still be there, but it will not stay with you long initially. All right. After a while, maybe initially it stay with you for maybe one day, through continuous practice, it stay with you for half a day. Continuous practice, it stay with you for maybe 1 hour. After a while, it stay with you for 30 minutes. After a while, it stay with you for 10 minutes. After a while, it doesn't arrive. Before it can even arise, you already recognize that anger is arising. So because you recognize it, it doesn't arise. Right? It requires practice, but you don't practice, of course, we will never have writings on water. We will always have writings on rocks, isn't it? So it all starts with step one. We must tell ourselves that anger is one of the things that we want to overcome. Step two is, what do we do by trying to overcome anger? Right? And from a Buddhist perspective, it is developing mindfulness of feelings, of thoughts that arise. And after a period of time, when your mindfulness is strong enough, is skillful enough, you're able to recognize it. So that when it arises, you recognize, you know that you have been angry. All right? And you also know these right views, that it's not something that is wholesome. So it also requires right view. So if you have a combination of right views and right effort, that is why the Eightfold Path is so important. So we have to practice all the Eightfold Path. Right? Because if you only practice mindfulness without right views, then you become like the sniper who learns to be very mindful in how to shoot people, how to harm people, how to kill people. You see, but it's not based on right views. You see, so before one can have writings on water, maybe it starts writings on the rocks, then slowly it shifts to writing on the sand. Okay? So it starts with practice. The more we practice, the more that will reduce. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was once asked, do you still get angry? He was once asked this question. And his reply was, he laughed, he said, of course, you continue to ask me stupid questions, I will get angry. But I know that anger has arisen, and I will then laugh it off, and then I will not let the anger stay with me. You see, so we must, maybe we are not, of course, we are not at the level of His Holiness, but surely that is an inspiration that we can put into practice, right? Okay.
Thank you, Sister
Yes.
Penny. Anyone else with questions or comments?
And one preach writings on water.
Or you can write in your questions if you need.
Okay, I just want to know your thoughts on this, Brother Benny. The Buddha mentioned a lot of people being promiscuous. I think it's mentioned promiscuous about sex,
Promiscuous, yeah.
Even there was something about prostitution, and it's even in our 5 precepts. Why is it so that he focused so sharply on any idea?
I don't think he focuses primarily on that, but sexual activity is definitely one of the strongest forms of cravings, right? It's one of the strongest forms of craving. So he's just using that as one of those unwholesome things where we are attached to, where we should see its nature, right? But that's not the only one. In fact, I think he also spent a lot of emphasis on overcoming anger. I don't have any particular source from the Pali Canon where the Buddha says that anger is more serious than for example, if you talk about sex or promiscuity, that will be under greed, right? Lust, right? Under greed, you've got greed and lust, right? One category. Then you got hatred, anger, aversion, another category, and then you got the delusion, right? So, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, it is said that among these three, of course, deluded is the most difficult to get rid of, but between the two, the most serious one is actually anger and hatred. That doesn't mean that greed and lust, all these are okay. Just like when you compare these two, so hatred is actually the strongest. That's why, for example, if you read the Bodhicharya Vatara, the path of the Bodhisattva, Shantideva says that even if you have practiced all eons, tons and tons of good merits, just a moment of anger would wipe out completely all the good that you have done in the past. That's from Shantideva, right? Bodhicharya. So I'm sure in the Pali Canon there's somewhere which not only talks about the sexual aspects, but also the anger. But for lay people, the Buddha just said sexual misconduct. You see, so the Buddha didn't say even lay people you should avoid sex altogether.
But why is it? Why is it in the 5 precepts, and not anger being inside the 5 precepts? Or is it somewhere lost in translation when we translate the precepts?
Yeah. Well, for example, sometimes it's implied. The first precept, all right, anger is also implied in the first precept. You most of the time when you kill, it is out of anger. Of course, you can kill because of your greed for something, but it is said that for killing to take place, the thought of anger, because the reverse of killing is compassion, right? Right? It's compassion. So I suppose it is implied in that particular in the first of the 5 precepts. Yeah. Stealing, well, maybe not so much, but particularly the first precept. And killing is causing harm. That is a very, very, very strong emphasis in the Buddha's teachings. But elsewhere, for example, the 3 roots of evil, lobha, dosa, moha. You see, so they have equal footing. Right. So I don't think the Buddha particularly singled out about the sexual thing. But for monastics, right, he wanted them to be celibates. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So anyone on the floor? Any comments?
Brother Danny, if we practice writings on water slowly, are we going towards the direction of becoming an arahant?
Well, it is said that this is one of the characteristics of enlightened beings, right?
Yeah.
The characteristics of an enlightened being. You see, the beauty about Buddhist practice is we don't practice with always this thought, I want to be this, I want to be that. You see, that's not the intention. You don't practice and say, oh, why do I practice? Because I want to be an arahant. Then that self, that the ego is still there. So you practice because you realize that there's so much dukkha in this world. You want to, it's not only you yourself want to get out of suffering, you want other beings to be free from suffering. This is what you would do. Right? So in the process, you do a number of things which the Buddha has recommended. You avoid evil, you do good, you purify your mind, you do all those things. The arahantship or your sakadagami or your sotapanna is a natural result. Yeah, it's a natural result of your practice.
But is it wrong we set my aspiration like I want to become a deva, or I set my aspiration that, oh, I need to work towards this direction, that, I set an aspiration, I want to be an arahant, so I need to practice like that.
Sure,
is it wrong to do that?
No, I think they are noble aspirations. Your patana, patana, right?
Okay.
So these are noble aspirations. Yeah. Some people have very subtle, very low-level aspirations. They only want to aspire to be born as a deva. So that's the aspiration. And in the Buddhist teachings, there's nothing wrong with that. But if one understands the Dharma, then wants to have more than just want to be born as a as a deva. Some people have aspirations that they want to be born as a human again, so that the next life they can continue to help other sentient beings. It depends what is your
suffering. Deva, no need to do anything every
No need to
day.
do anything.
Sing
Well, it depends on
song,
your
enjoy.
depends on your motivation. Oh, that's not a correct view. That's not a correct view. Because devas, definitely, they have to be reborn.
Yeah, but enjoy first. Okay.
Okay, if there's no other question, we'll end this session today.
Okay, sure.
So you want to unshare your screen first, Brother Benny?
Sure.
You'll do the sharing of merits.
Yep, I'll stop sharing, no problem.
Okay, we hope you've gained much wisdom by listening to this Dhamma sharing today. And don't be afraid, the slides, we will be sharing the slides on our WhatsApp group later. A very big thank you to Brother Benny again for his fascinating insights to today's sutta. And we will continue again next month.